Okay, welcome back. This is part 2 of our series on what does GDPR really mean for B2B companies. I'm Brian Hengesbaugh, partner in the Chicago office. Part 1 was an introduction and a discussion about what your role is as a provider in a B2B context under GDPR. Are you a controller processor? This part 2 is going to look at IT performance standards growing out of GDPR. Part 3 will be on data breach, and part 4 will be on customer contracting issues. So IT performance standards, we're going to take this from the perspective that you've looked at your lines of business, and for some of them you are what's called a data processor, instruction taker, acting on behalf of your customers. Now, growing out of GDPR, one of the ways that the European General Data Protection Regulation really is a step up in terms of regulatory rigor is around this bundle of rights that is conferred on individuals called data subjects. And these rights are things like the right to say, gee, I want access to the data that the company has about me, but not only get a copy of the data itself, but I want to know what the sources of that data were. I want to know to whom the data was disclosed. I want to know if the data was transferred internationally. I also have other rights. I might have the right to object to certain handling of data. I might want to, as a data subject, instruct you to only do some things, not others, with that data. I might want to direct you to delete that information when it's no longer needed. And there's some other ancillary rights and obligations that flow out of GDPR, such as a general overall duty not to keep data longer than you have a legitimate or legal compliance reason to be keeping it. So there's an overall data deletion requirement that comes in, which is actually useful even from a U.S. perspective on things like data security, breach notification, and e-discovery. In other words, you don't want to be holding on to data forever, because if you have a data incident, you might be notifying on very old data. We had one client at one point that had a database that was subject to an attack that was very old and had Social Security numbers for a part of the business they didn't even need anymore. So if they had been able to be a little bit tighter on their overall information governance, they might have avoided any kind of an incident related to that database. So there's many good reasons, or e-discovery reasons. There's a cost always to producing data in litigation. But of course, if you've securely deleted data because you no longer need it, then you're not going to have to go back and produce. So many good reasons to, as part of an overall information governance perspective, be thinking on these things. But when you're looking at it in the context as a provider to your customers, one of the challenges are you might get a clause from a customer that says you as provider will comply with applicable data protection law. Now, what's wrong with that? Why is that something that doesn't really work? Well, particularly on things like IT performance standards, these don't apply directly to providers or processors under GDPR. These are duties that apply to controllers, who are then obligated to pass on to their providers instructions on what it is that the providers are supposed to be doing. So a broad provision that says you as provider will comply with applicable law leaves it blurry as to, wait, what of this, does this apply to me? Does it not apply to me? Not only that, what are you really expecting me to do? You know, a lot of these IT performance standards have really a lot of cost implications, particularly with the right to be forgotten or the right to request data to be deleted. So it's really helpful as a provider to go through the IT performance standards, you know, and they're mostly in the Article 15 through Article 22 of the GDPR itself has a lot of the core requirements. Go through each of those. Think about how line of business by line of business you can comply with those or help your customers to address those, and then ultimately think about turning some of that back into text that you put into your standard terms with customers to really define what it is you'll do. So really important stuff. Thanks for watching.